What if the great serpent never left the old woman remembered the day her grandmother stopped sleeping on the ground? She never explained why. She simply rolled her mat from the earth floor, hung it between the posts, and stared at the door each night until dawn painted the sky pale. No one asked questions in the village of Caño Hondo. You learned early that some silences were not empty. They were full of things older than language. The river had always been wide. Wider than any river had the right to be. And in its dark belly, something moved that was not fish, not current, not the dreams of children. The people who lived along its banks called it simply the Long One. Not with fear in their voices, at least not at first. With the same flat tone a farmer uses when he says drought. A word that holds the world ending inside it, spoken quietly so the world does not hear and hurry. He had always been there. That was the truth no outsider ever understood. The missionaries came and called the villagers primitive for refusing to settle near the lower banks. The merchants came and called them superstitious for burning their nets if they dragged up certain scales, dark as old iron, white as a man's palm. The government officials came and drew lines on their maps and declared the jungle tamed. They left before nightfall. They always left before nightfall. But the people stayed. And so did the Long One. For generations, there had been an arrangement, unwritten, unspoken, observed the way the faithful observe a fast. You did not take more than you needed from the river. You did not linger in the shallows after the light turned gold. You did not let your children play at the place where the reeds grew tall and the water sat still and black. In return, the Long One moved through the deep places and left the villagers to their grief and their harvests and their ordinary dying. It was not peace. It was the agreement between two things that could not destroy each other without destroying themselves. Then the year of the great dry season came, and the agreement broke. It did not break because of cruelty. It broke the way most agreements break, because someone was hungry, and someone else was afraid, and neither of them stopped to think about what they were unraveling. A young man named Elias had 3 children, and a wife whose cough had been getting worse since the rains failed. He had fished the same shallow bend for 15 years. That year the fish were gone, driven deeper by the heat or by something else he did not name. So Elias went to the lower bank. At midday, not dusk. He told himself the stories were for the old and the timid. He told himself a man with hungry children cannot afford the luxury of caution. He came back without his net, without his catch, and without the fingers on his left hand. He sat in the doorway of his home for 3 days and said nothing. His wife stopped coughing. His children stopped asking questions. The village watched him with the particular tenderness reserved for men who have seen something that has rearranged the inside of his chest. After the 3rd day, Elias stood up and walked to the edge of town and did not come back. Some said he went north to find work. Some said he went into the jungle to find something else. His wife never remarried. She hung his spare shirt by the window the way you hang a lantern, not for decoration, but because you are still hoping something will find its way home by the light. The dry season continued. The river shrank back from its banks like an old man pulling his arms close to his chest. And the Long One, unhungered by flood, uncontained by water, began to move in ways it had never moved before. Not with anger. Hunger does not need anger. Hunger is patient in ways that anger never is. The village of Caño Hondo learned the difference between an animal that hunts and an animal that is simply present. A presence you cannot fight, cannot reason with, cannot shame into mercy. 3 goats vanished from the pen closest to the water. Then an old dog that had slept outside its master's door for 11 years. Then, and this is where the silence in the village changed its texture, a child's sandal was found in the mud near the reeds, small and clean, as if it had been set down carefully by someone who had simply walked out of it and kept going. The child was not found. The village elder, a woman named Doa Perpetua, called a gathering that night. Not to plan, not to fight. She was 81 years old and had buried a husband and 2 sons and had stopped believing in the kind of strength that announces itself. She simply sat in the center of the square and asked people to say the names of what they had lost. Not to grieve louder. To remember that loss has a shape, and a shape can be carried, and what can be carried does not crush you. The long one did not come at night. Whether it was coincidence or something older than coincidence, no one argued. Though a Perpetua went home and slept on the ground as she always had, her mat flat on the earth, the door open. Someone asked her if she was not afraid. She said, "I have been afraid my whole life. I am simply tired of rearranging my furniture because of it." Families began to leave. Not all at once. That would have felt like defeat. One by one, quietly, the way candles go out in a room when no one is watching. Each family that left took something from the village that could not be packed. A memory of who you were when you were all together. A version of the morning that no longer existed once those hands were gone from the breakfast table. Those who stayed were not braver. They were simply more rooted to the soil, to the graves behind the church, to the idea that a place is not just geography, but the accumulated weight of everything you have loved inside it. They adapted. They built higher. They changed the hours they kept, the paths they walked, the sounds they listened for. They did not conquer the long one. They learned to live inside its shadow the way all human beings, everywhere, learn to live inside the shadows of the things that are larger than them. And here's what the story leaves behind. Not as a lesson, but as a question you carry home with you. There are forces in this world that do not hate you. They are simply indifferent to the smallness of your plans. And the true trial of a human soul is not whether you can defeat such a force, but whether you can remain decent inside the fear of it. Whether you can still say someone's name in the dark. Whether you can leave the door open, not because you are not afraid, but because you have decided that fear will not be the last word written in the story of who you were. The old woman still does not sleep on the ground, but she leaves the window open. She says it is. For the air,